Hey there everybody, my name is Dallas Brooks and I'm the academic recruiter and the transfer coordinator for the University of Florida's Milton campus. Now officially we are known as the West Florida Research and Education Center, but seeing as how that doesn't roll off the tongue very well in conversation, we usually refer to ourselves as the Milton campus. Now at this location we do offer two transfer-based bachelor's degree programs. We have Natural Resource Conservation and Plant Science. These degrees are something that students can get into if they get an AA, an Associate of Arts, from another two-year college, and then they can come to us for another 2 years for a total of 4 years for their bachelor's degree. Now, what I want to do is try to go over some information about what exactly is natural resource conservation. What is plant science? Because these are names that you can throw out, and a lot of people have like different ideas about what these mean. So I want to kind of more thoroughly explain these so that students can get an idea if these are fields that they would like to get into or not. And then I'll also give you some general information if this is something that you're interested in, how you can get in touch with me, and further ways to be able to come into this program. Now, as I go through this presentation, I'm going to use a lot of acronyms. University of Florida loves a good acronym. Now, of course, UF stands for University of Florida, but you might also hear me say IFAS. IFAS stands for the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. You might also hear me say CALS. Now, that's C-A-L-S, not cows as in moo. CALS stands for the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, which is the college that I represent. You might also hear me say WFREC. As I mentioned, that is our official title, which is the West Florida Research and Education Center. University of Florida has several RECs. They actually have 12 across the state of Florida, but only 5 of them offer degree-seeking programs for students. You may hear me say NRC. NRC stands for Natural Resource Conservation. You might hear me say PLS. That stands for Plant Science. You might also hear me refer to SFFGS, which is the School of Forestry, Fisheries, and Geomatics. That is a sub-department of CALS. And then those other ones down at the bottom, the BBQ, the LOL, the peanut butter jelly time, I just threw those in because that list wasn't long enough and I had to add a couple extra on there for you. Now, as I mentioned, our official title is the West Florida Research and Education Center. There are several others across the state, but of all of the ones that University of Florida has, we are the largest. We have several different moving parts. Now, for our actual educational portion, we share the campus with Pensacola State College in Milton, Florida. We operate in classrooms based in Building 4800. Our faculty and staff are housed in Building 4900, and we have 2 very large greenhouses on site, which is where a lot of our plant science students spend most of their time. We also have a 644-acre research farm located up in Jay. That's a very large facility, a very, very important part of the WFREC. Now, in our academic programs, at any given point in time on an annual basis, we have anywhere between 40 to 60 or 70 students, and that covers the entirety of our master's students, our PhD students, and our undergraduate students. Right now, we have 14 students who are pursuing their master's or their PhD, and we have 46 students who are in our undergraduate program. Of that number, about 21 of those students are plant science, and 25 are NRC. Usually speaking, our NRC students will outnumber our plant science students about 3 to 1. Natural resource conservation. What is natural resource conservation? Whenever I say NRC, what does that bring to mind? Natural resource conservation is essentially the study of all of the interactions between our natural resources and how it is that we conserve those resources and everything that makes up our natural heritage. When I say natural heritage, that's another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily know off the top of their head. So to quickly explain that one, natural heritage is whenever you woke up this morning, because it exists and you exist, it is part of your natural heritage. All the forests, all of the ecosystems that are out there, being able to get up and enjoy a breath of fresh air, have a drink of clean drinking water, those are all things that are part of your natural heritage. And so learning how to conserve the resources that comprise that heritage and all of the interactions in between that is what is covered underneath the umbrella that is natural resource conservation. And those natural resources are pretty far reaching. A lot of it is the things that most people regularly associate with natural resource conservation. That is our forests, our wildlife, our soils, our air, our water. There's a lot of other things underneath that wheelhouse that most people don't readily think of. It's anything that we use for our energy resources. So it's our natural gas, our coal, our oil, anything that we use as far as like a mineral, anything that is a metal, the metals in your cell phone. These are all natural resources that we have to learn how to utilize in a responsible way. And managing those resources is a big part of what natural resource conservation is all about. There are a lot of different careers that you can get into underneath natural resource conservation. So a very common one is you can become a habitat restoration specialist. There's certainly a lot of habitat restoration that goes on along the Gulf Coast. You have to imagine that we are in a natural disturbance prone area. We get a lot of hurricanes. There's also a lot of development going on. So that is something that a habitat restorationist would go in and try to curb or change after the fact. Game wardens. A lot of our students will become game wardens and work for FWC. They want to be involved on the law enforcement side of things and help protect those resources that make up our natural heritage. You might be familiar with wildland firefighters. So anytime that you see folks out working a prescribed burn, that is being done by certified wildland firefighters. Another one that is really cool that you may not have heard of is that of urban forester. Urban forestry is where we take vegetative species or trees and use them in an urban environment to help facilitate the environment in some way. Now, I know that when I talk about urban environments, that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but it is a very real thing. The example that I like to use is many of the places along the Gulf Coast and some of your coastal cities. Houston's in Texas is a big one. Down in South Florida, many of those cities down there are utilizing urban forestry for flood mitigation. So they would take, back in the day in about the 30s or 40s, they would channelize some of our riverways or create channels so that when floodwaters rise, they would have a very quick system for getting that water out of the cityscape. And of course, a concrete channel is a really quick way to do that. It acts a lot like plumbing in your house. But just like plumbing in your house, whenever that system backs up, where does that water go? It goes back up into the cities. So it sort of became a little bit more customary to reevaluate these ecosystems and say, is there anything that we can use that's better than just a concrete channel? And there is. So these channels are actually being excavated and replanted with vegetative species, tree species that are very good at not only soaking up a lot of water and thus mitigating floodwaters, but also for erosion control. They stabilize better than concrete ever could. So urban foresters are playing an active role in reshaping how it is that we mitigate some of these other factors. And of course, there's more to it than just flood mitigation, but that's just an example. Now, plant science, where natural resource conservation is a very broad field and covers a lot of different things, plant science is a little bit more particular. It's a little bit more driven. So plant science has to deal with very specifically how it is that we utilize plants in the environment in a way that alters the ecosystem, either for the benefit of the plant or that plant species, or for humans, or both. Ideally, we'd like to try and manage for everything to the benefit of all. And the way that we do that is by learning about plant physiology, learning about soil science, learning about hydrology. What are the things that it takes to make a plant successfully grow and be healthy? It's different for a number of different species. It's different for different ecosystems and the plant communities within those ecosystems. And so we have to be able to learn how to utilize those things very specifically. It can be as simple and as direct as learning how to work with a singular organism, say a plant in a pot, a flower in a pot, or working with that entire species. Imagine a field of those flowers and understanding if what we're looking at is, say, a healthy crop. Are we looking at a field that is producing our crop effectively, efficiently? We can look at it, from sustainability. Are we growing this crop in a sustainable way? Or we can look at it from an ecosystem standpoint. Are we looking at a healthy meadow, a field of flowers that is supposed to be here? Or are we perhaps looking at something that could be an invasive species? Should we be instead looking for a forest where now we have a field of these flowers? An understanding of plant science allows us to better understand how to answer these questions. And there's a number of different careers that you can get into with plant science as well. You can get into nursery management or work for a professional grower. There's a lot of really large grow houses in the area that are very successful, very prominent. Flowerwood is a very large grower in the southeast. They supply a lot of your familiar big box stores with some of the plants and flowers that you'll see grown. And then you can also get into it from a research perspective. You can get into plant breeding and genetics, understanding how it is that we can better certain species, how we can better, again, crops that we do grow. You can work with ecotourism. There's a lot of countries out there whose entire economies are dependent on ecotourism. And of course, you can get in and become something like an arborist. You can even become a GIS specialist, which is Geographic Information Systems. The example that I always use there is GIS is the science of working with layering of maps and understanding use, where we have our resources, and how we can map that out using GPS systems, Geographic Information Systems. So if you imagine, if you've ever seen a map in a National Geographic before, where they show the different blobs of color on a map where you might find a certain species or where you might find a certain ecosystem. Well, that was done with GIS. Now, our campus is very different, and our learning environment is very different from what you might experience at some other colleges, some other universities. So we like to make the classroom whatever we want it to be. Now, these pictures are from our campus here in Milton. So students in these photos are actually learning how to use tools to understand light coming through a forest canopy. So we actually get out there and get our hands dirty. We learn with the tools of the trade. If you're going to be learning forest mensuration and how to measure a healthy forest, well, you're going to have to actually learn how to utilize those things in the field. So there's no better way to do that than to actually get your hands on the equipment and start doing those things yourself. In the picture on the bottom right that you see, that is where we are learning about how to trap different wildlife species. Very oftentimes, if you want to get into studying wildlife, you've got to be able to capture certain individuals of a species, and that's not always the easiest thing. Most wildlife that I've come across really doesn't want to sit still while you're sitting there poking and prodding at it. So you've got to learn how to catch it. And the same way that you would catch a bat is not the same way that you catch a fish. It's not the same way that you trap a fox. It's not the same way that you trap a bear. So you have to learn how it is that we corral these animal species to be able to take certain samples and understand what we're working with. And so we actually have to learn about that. We learn about all the different ways that you would catch salamanders or turtles, tortoises, that sort of thing. It's very important to learn how to track all of these things down. These are our on-site greenhouses. I had previously mentioned that we have two very large 100-foot greenhouses on campus. We also have some shade houses. This is where our plant science students will spend the vast majority of their time. Our plant propagation class is held in these greenhouses. Several other of our classes are out there as well. And again, we take the classroom wherever we need it to be for that day. If we need to go and understand, hydrology studies, and if we're working with a healthy waterway, then we're going to go out there and we're going to go out on an airboat for the day and we're going to take those measurements. If we need to learn how to spot, different wildlife species in a wetland, then we're going to go out there and we're going to examine that and see what kind of biodiversity we have on hand. The best way to do this is to actually get out there and see it in person, to be out in the open, to be out in the woods. There's many things you can learn in a textbook, and that's always, of course, a very good way to learn things. But we try to make sure that we're exposing our students to things actually out in the world and give you that real world experience. There's only so much that you can learn in a classroom before you have to learn how to properly apply that actually out in the field. And this is another example of that. So this is in a familiar location. This is out at Shoreline Park in Gulf Breeze. So folks who are local to the Pensacola area will recognize that familiar water tower way off in the distance there. But in here, we're dragging a seine net through the waterways to try and catch little baby fish fry. I know every time I say that, I always get a little bit hungry and I start craving like some fried mullet or something. But that is actually how you refer to baby fish, juvenile fish. And they're trying to be able to understand and do a biodiversity study. You know, how many species do we have on hand? Are we seeing too many? Are we seeing too few? If so, can we start asking ourselves the questions why? Can we start understanding what's happening in an ecosystem? What's going on with our natural heritage? The best way to learn how to do that is to actually go out, wade out into the water, and drag the nets and start working in the ecosystems that you're going to be a part of. These are some more pictures of places where we go so that way we can actually truly get that more in-depth experience, become involved with it. Our students get that firsthand experience and start to understand from people who manage and who have the careers that they will someday have themselves. So this is St. Marks Wildlife Refuge. This is one of the oldest refuges in the United States, and it's a very unique place. It's very biodiverse, and it utilizes a system of floodgates to be able to manage freshwater and saltwater flows in a series of pools that it manages for a number of different wildlife, particularly some migratory shorebird species and waterbird species. So very, very cool place that we go generally every year or so. And it's always awesome every time we go. And it's a very cool place to see how things work and how natural resource conservation can function on a broad scale. Now, if you are interested in these programs, there's a number of different ways that you can come into this program, a number of different ways that you can become a Gator. Now, the ones that I have listed here are just a fun little joke. Of course, you know, no one's actually going to become a true alligator. This is just a fun little joke of mine. But the true ways that you can actually become a University of Florida Gator are, of course, you can transfer into these programs. You can come in as a freshman. If you are fresh out of high school and you would like to go over to the Gainesville campus, that is always something that is an available opportunity to anybody in this area. But for most of our students, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to up and transfer and transplant yourself entirely and move to Gainesville to become a student. Many of our older students already have, you know, their lives here, their families are here. And so to meet that need, you can always come in as a transfer student, which is the bulk of how the students come into our programs here locally in Milton. So you can get your 2-year degree, you can get an AA from any one of the colleges that you see here, Pensacola State College, Northwest Florida, Gulf Coast State College, any one of these schools has a degree, an AA degree that will allow you to transfer those credits directly into a degree here at the University of Florida in natural resource conservation or in plant science. And then you can also become a certificate student. If you're looking to perhaps try something out or gain some additional professional experience, we do offer some certificate courses as well, which are sort of like mini degrees. They're usually a small number of credits, anywhere between 9 to 17 credits, that just allow you to put that little extra feather in your cap. Now, if you're interested in these programs and perhaps you're wondering about what opportunities there are to help you pay for this, a lot of people that start to hear about going to UF immediately see dollar signs and they get really worried about how they're going to pay for their time here. Most of the students who are attending here at the University of Florida in Milton do not have to pay out of pocket for their tuition. We have so many scholarship and grant opportunities that it's rare that students have to pay out of pocket for their tuition, and they certainly don't have to take out student loans. We have scholarships that are through if you're a high school student, we have the 2+2 scholarship, which accepts a limited number of applicants every year, and that allows you to pay for the entirety of your tuition at PSC for the first 2 years, and then your first $1,000 of each year after that at University of Florida. Of course, we accept, you know, the Pell Grant and your federal aid from FAFSA, which is a very reliable source of finding help for financial aid. We also have our own college scholarship, which is the Cal Scholarship. This is a very, very big portfolio, a very large scholarship portfolio that usually offers up quite a bit of money for our students each year and is very good at supplementing FAFSA, your Pell, things like that. We have localized scholarships that are from independent groups such as gardening clubs. We have an on-site scholarship which is funded through our annual Festival of Flowers. If you have not been, we usually hold that the first weekend of every April out here at the Pensacola State College campus, and it's an amazing event. I highly encourage you all to come out here. But we do have a number of options to be able to help you cover your tuition and your expenses. There's just so much financial aid that's on the table that it really makes it a lot more accessible for students to actually be able to get their education here and pay for it as well. Now, if you have any questions about this and if you would like to connect with me, I have made my contact information available to your professor, to your counselors, so that way you can reach out to me. It's very easy to find me at the Pensacola State College campus. We share the campus with them. Again, my office is located in building 4900 on site. So I'm not in Gainesville. I am local to the area. I am in Milton, Florida. And if you'd like to schedule an appointment with me to learn more about this program, I would love to meet up with you, be able to discuss more than just the scholarships, talk about more about the learning environment, the specifics of what you want to get into, what career opportunities there are, and just so much more. But thank you all and have a great day.